Trying to keep to the middle of the slowly crumpling structure, my eyes kept returning to that well-lit monument, towering in the starry night sky. This area couldn't be entirely without order. Someone had ignited large braziers, welcoming me to whatever was waiting this way. Upon discovering a broken section of the bridge, I gained access to an overgrown area below. Oh, bloody hell, those degenerate inbreds again. I thought I was done with that whole lot of brutish and feeble-minded animals. They had roamed that sickening wilderness, a place teeming with giant crabs and mysterious lights roasting anyone close by. Again, not if I had something to say about it. More of those pillars meant for ritual fires. This somehow felt awfully familiar, and not in a comforting way. Then something caught my attention. A beautiful voice reached me from somewhere ahead. While doing my best to ignore that otherworldly and strangely intriguing song, I was pierced by guilt and sadness. Trying to avoid that big-boned simpleton singer, most likely wanting to bash my head in, I made my way around, but somehow kept coming closer. How could an ugly and inbred brute, such as that repulsive thing, produce something as beautiful as this? The lands between remained a paradox, with gods who obviously delighted in making a mockery of its inhabitants. Exactly to what twisted degree, I was about to discover as I approached dark buildings adorned with strange and organic-looking sculptures. Oh, down there as well. What was the purpose of those nightmarish things? And what were they yearning for, arms spread out like that? Still closer to that gigantic and unsettling statue, I touched the site of lost grace nearby, before proceeding onward. Entering the city, I was almost scared to death by some of those ghastly sculptures. But even more curious, as I jumped down and defended myself against a half-naked individual firing at me with a crossbow, a peculiar thing happened to a nearby puddle. From the silvery substance, another strangely colored woman rose, up to no good. Ending them turned out to be surprisingly tedious. They were tough, even if those muted sirens kept distracting me with rather agreeable attire. Continuing further, I was surprised to discover just how close that horrendous statue was now. But also, I wasn't entirely sure it was a statue after all. Had that thing been alive at one point? Pushing that unpleasant thought aside, I finally approached a grand building. In truth, the only path forward. Inside, I found myself in a church-like space with a distinctly cool appearance. Everything in this area, come to think of it, almost seemed as if it were made out of ice. Would you look at that? The black wet blade I just found was engraved with a cipher. I didn't get to study the tool, though, because at the end of a long corridor, something caught my attention. Here, a chamber was walled off by a shimmering barrier, behind which someone seemed to pray. Using a key I had found earlier, I discovered that the gargoyle mechanism unlocked it, and I was granted a clear view. Entering a serene space of contemplation, I announced my presence. After giving some attention to that curiously dressed creature wearing unbecomingly long garments, I realized just how quaint this chamber was. What were they doing here? And why had they put such effort into this particular chest? Oh my. Though I didn't quite know what to expect, I felt dormant powers within this strange creature. But then again, none of the other summoned allies ever showed any backbone. Already knowing just how impotent it would be, I decided to ignore it altogether. What was that thing? Most likely a peculiar piece of art. Wondering who had the audacity to create such a bizarre sculpture, I climbed down into a large hall, where I found quite a few silvery husks scattered on the floor, as well as another of those enigmatic inhabitants of this region. What the actual fun was not being had, as I now faced not only two of these exotic creatures, but also the large, apparently hostile sculpture itself. Ha! Which turned out to be delightfully indifferent regarding its choice of victims. Fleeing from this carnival of obscure aesthetics, I gleefully realized that the vulgar sculpture was far too obese to escape its prison. Contrary to my otherwise noble nature, I even shouted, "What are you going to do about it, fatty?" Ouch! Catching my breath and acknowledging the consequence of my ill-fated attempt at mockery, I was rewarded with satisfying entertainment of the most glorious sort. With that delicious atrocity warming my heart, I was now given the opportunity to study the surroundings. I quickly discovered a nearby site of grace and found myself on that great road previously seen from above. Surely this was the way forward. And of course, at the end of it all, the enormous and frightening figure sat stoically on a throne. Not particularly feeling like venturing into the midst of that unfriendly throng of puddles, I made sure to avoid it altogether. Had that creature been a mighty king of some sort? Clearly, the inhabitants of this enigmatic city had worshipped the creature, or perhaps been oppressed. Now what? Another one of those half-naked, silvery individuals bothered me for a moment. Smiting that fellow whose attire apparently made him freeze, I located two noteworthy objects nearby. First of all, a mechanical device used for travels. Second, a luxuriously decorated chest outright reeking of immense value. Slowly pushing the heavy lid aside, I was greatly pleased to grab a blood-drenched dagger inside. Somehow knowing that the object my mistress so desperately yearned for was now in my possession, I felt pride and lusted for a reward. Touching the device, I was greeted by the otherworldly voice of beauty, the very one belonging to that big-boned monstrosity. This time, and without any sort of hesitation, I went for her. Killing that creature would be an act of kindness to this world, as it was clearly capable only of producing degenerate and disfigured offspring. Having done so, I was lured closer to a remarkable sight. A band of brutish tribe members stomping their feet in unison, accompanying yet another singer. What was it with this foul gang and their damn songs? Wild animals simply stood there, observing this barbaric ritual with an eerie calm. Maybe the brutes did contain some merit after all. What was this? I had been wrong. The simple tribe found beneath this wondrous night sky, shamelessly giving in to heretical beliefs and customs, didn't deserve generosity. I lost control of myself and dissolved mindlessly in a soothing sea of fury. The world came to a halt. I saw every single thing around me unfold long before it happened, and I released these unworthy abominations from this wasteland of barbarism. But it didn't stop there, as I was reminded of the secret of the pillars and what had been hidden. Crawling through time, I approached a glowing carcass, this one of even greater size than the one I had seen so long ago. Floating through a vast and swampy arena, full of spirit wildlife, I let myself go and tore into another majestic creature of the old world. I felt like slowly drowning in a nightmare, spanning decades. I wasn't the one doing this, I couldn't be. I was but a witness. After the longest sleep, I awoke on Torrent from a dreadful fever state. It was night, and my trusty steed had apparently brought me back to Limgrave, leaving the crater with a bitter taste. One thought lingered in the back of my tainted mind. I had embarked on the dark path of my mistress, yearning to join her and upend it all.